Hi everyone, I'm Susan Mulvihill from Susan's in the Garden. Today's topic is growing microgreens from start to finish. Now, if you're not familiar with microgreens, you can probably guess from their name that they're a small type of a salad green that you would grow, and you would be correct. These guys are very flavorful and very nutritious. As a matter of fact, research has shown that the plants have anywhere from 4 to 40 times the amount of nutrients that the mature form of the plants would have. Wow! Now, I have been growing microgreens for the last couple of years, and I wanted to share with you what I've learned. So let's get started. Growing microgreens is easy peasy. You just need a few pieces of equipment and then you're well on your way. The first thing that you need is some kind of a planting container. It could be a planting flat. I like to use these half flats, or you could use a full flat, and you find those in garden centers. It could be a flower pot, it could be a flower box, anything like that would work as long as it has drainage holes in the bottom, and that's because you do not want the soil to get sopping wet. Now, if you're doing this indoors, you definitely want some kind of a flat or other container that does not have drainage holes, because if this drains, you do not want it going all over a surface that shouldn't get wet. You also need some kind of a soilless mix, and that is for starting the seeds. And I recommend either a germination mix, which is also called a seed starting mix, or an organic potting soil. You do not want to use garden soil. The next thing you need is some type of seed. I recommend using organic seeds, and if you look in some of the larger well-stocked garden centers or online, you can find microgreen seeds, which are all different kinds of crops, but ones that are in bulk so that you get a good price on them. And the last thing you need is some type of a clear dome lid to cover your plantings, and that is to increase humidity so that the seeds will germinate well. But you could also use a clear plastic bag. The first thing I did is I pre-moistened the soil. That's because if you just use a dry potting mix or seed starting mix, the water will tend to run right off the surface, and so that's not good. So you want it to be about the amount of moistness that you would feel in a wrung out sponge. Now I'm going to use these seeds that are brassica mixes. Brassicas are in the cabbage family. And when you look at this, you'll think I'm planting these way too closely, but you really want a thick stand of seedlings to harvest. It's not like you're growing these to transplant elsewhere. You know, we gardeners are so great about being careful to space seeds properly. However, in this case, you don't have to do that. So once I get a nice covering of these seeds, I'm going to just press them down with my hand, just so they make good contact with the soil. Now in this other flat, I'm going to plant some sprouting pea seeds. And once again, I'm planting them quite closely. They're a good sized seed though. So I'm just trying to fill up the flat a little bit. Now I've learned something interesting in doing this for a couple of years. For everything but pea seeds, you do not have to cover the seeds. I know that breaks yet another gardening rule that we gardeners are all so good about. However, with pea seeds, I think because they're going to be such large seedlings, they do better if they have about 1/4 inch of soil over them. I think maybe it just holds them into the soil a little bit better, and perhaps gives a little bit better germination too. Okay, so I have my 2 flats planted. The brassicas are not covered with soil, they don't need to be, and the peas have about 1/4 inch of soil added to the top. Now I'm just going to gently water them in with this lovely little bottle waterer here. And that's just to get them off to a good start. I'm not using a ton of water, as you can see. Just enough to moisten everything. Okay. And then the cover goes on top. Or again, you could use a clear plastic bag and that would work great. The last step is to put your planted containers underneath some type of a light source. Now I'm lucky, I have a nice grow light set up here, but if you don't have one, don't worry about it because you can still do this without any problems. Just put your containers somewhere that is very bright or in a sunny window, something along those lines. But if it's super sunny, make sure that it's not getting too hot under this little dome lid because that can inhibit germination. So I'm going to leave this lid in place until the majority of the seeds have sprouted. So let's check back on them in a couple of days and see how they're doing. Okay, well it hasn't even quite been 48 hours yet, but I want to show you what's happening with the seeds. I wanted to give you a close-up of what's happening with the flat that has the brassica seeds in it. And you'll notice the seeds are already sprouting, which is amazing considering how little time has gone by. And that's one of the cool things about the fact that a lot of the microgreen seeds don't need to be covered with soil, because it gives you the opportunity to see what happens with a seed as it goes through the germination process. Now the other thing I wanted to point out is you'll notice a lot of little bits of what looks like white fuzz. You might think that's a mold or a fungus, but actually what you're seeing are the root hairs. And so I don't want you to freak out if you see something like that because it's perfectly normal. You're just seeing something that would normally be covered with soil. This is the flat that has the pea seeds in it, and if you look here you'll see some cracks in the soil surface, which tells you that something is going on down there, and that means it's starting to send down a root, and pretty soon I'll be seeing the little tender green sprouts coming up. Pea seeds are a little bit slower than the brassicas, which seem to be the fastest germinators. Now what I want to do is I'm going to put the clear plastic dome lid back on top and put the flat back under the light. And we'll check back on it in a couple of days. Okay, well it's been 2 more days, and so it's time to check on the microgreens. The first thing I want to point out is the amount of moisture inside that dome lid. That tells you just how much humidity there is inside it. So here is the brassica mix, and you can see that it's growing really well, but they really still just have their seed leaves, and I would rather wait until they have a couple of true leaves before I harvest them. But I'm definitely keeping the lid off because the soil is plenty moist and the majority of the seeds have germinated. I've spun around the flat so you can see what's happening on the pea side. Now you'll notice they have germinated really well, although I didn't do the best job of spreading out the seeds evenly, but that's okay. I don't know if you know this, but the greenery from pea plants is very tasty. It tastes sweet, it's real flavorful, and the flavor is just like freshly shelled peas, so it's absolutely delicious in salads. I'm sure you would enjoy it. Now, they're just a couple of inches tall so far. I typically wait until they're 4 to 6 inches tall before I harvest them. And the amazing thing I noticed last year is even though I had cut them all back down to the soil surface to harvest them, they actually came back again and again. So you really get your money's worth out of the pea seeds. I'm putting this flat back under the light, and I'm leaving off the dome lid. And in a couple of days when I harvest the brassica mix, I'm going to show you how I do it and what I do with them. Okay, it's been 3 more days and I'm ready to harvest my microgreens. So you can see there is a very quick turnaround, which I really like. But there's a few things I wanted to cover before I harvest them and show you what I do with them. First of all, there are all different kinds of seeds that you can grow, not just the things that I have here. But again, these are a type of pea that I found. These guys over here are a brassica mix. Again, that is a cabbage family, so things like kale, broccoli, and so on. And then I also have beet seeds, which I didn't plant this time, but I certainly intend to do them because beet microgreens are wonderful. Now I've got a Johnny's Selected Seeds catalog here, and they have a really great selection. At the end of this video, I will give you some names of possible sources for microgreen seeds. And nobody's paying me any money to do this, I'm just telling you what I know about. But just in this catalog alone, they have 3 pages of microgreen seeds. And it could be things like herbs, and I would love to try basil sometime. I've heard it's a slow grower, but I would love to have fresh basil in the middle of the winter. Other things that are here are broccoli, kale, mustard, pak choi, radishes, arugula, beets like I mentioned earlier, and Swiss chard. So there's all kinds of things that you could grow, and I definitely recommend experimenting. Now, of all the types of microgreens that you can grow, there is one exception to the rule of waiting until they have some true leaves before harvesting them, and that is sunflowers. Now, sunflower microgreens are absolutely delicious. They're kind of nutty and sweet, really wonderful. But when they get their true leaves, they can be hairy and bitter, and that's not going to be a whole lot of fun to swallow or eat. So those ones you want to harvest when they just have their seed leaves before they grow their true leaves. Another thing I wanted to mention was the timing of your plantings, because you always want to have microgreens available to eat. So when these guys are ready to harvest, then you probably want to plant your seeds for the next group so that as you're eating these over the course of a few days, the next batches of microgreens are growing. When you're harvesting your microgreens, you want to cut them off just above the soil, maybe like a 1/4 inch or so. And so what I like to do is just grab bunches of them and put them into the basket of a salad spinner, because that's an excellent way to clean them, just in case a little bit of soil came with the plants. I like to bag up my different types of microgreens separately, because sometimes I want just one particular kind of microgreen for a salad, although it's awfully fun to mix them up. Now you'll recall that I was saying earlier that the sprouts will come back again from the pea seeds. I'm still just baffled by that. But that's why I'm just going to water the flat again, put it under the light, and let that happen. I have washed off the pea seedlings with water, and then I just like to gently toss them in a salad spinner, and that is to knock off any excess water. The one thing that I have learned is that if you have a lot of moisture in your bag in the refrigerator, it's very easy for them to start spoiling, and you don't want that. Okay, now that I have harvested all of the brassicas, I wanted to show you something that worked really well for me last year. You know, I worried about how much germination mix or potting soil I was going to use going through the whole winter growing lots of microgreens. And actually what I do after this first picking is I take just a fork and I kind of fork through the soil and just really disturb the roots. Go through the whole flat. And then I pre-moisten the soil and sprinkle seeds again on the top. I know that sounds crazy, but they just come right back up, which is very nice. Now once that second crop of brassicas grows and I've harvested them, you're not going to believe this, but I actually flip over this whole block of soil in this flat. I fork through the roots again, and I plant more seeds in there. So I was able to get 3 uses out of 1 block of soil. So what do I do with my microgreens? Well, my husband and I love salad, and so this is a great way to have a very fresh salad during the winter months, and perhaps something that's a little unusual. So what I did in this case is I made a bed of both the brassicas and the pea microgreens. And I cut the peas in half because they're a little bit longer stem. I've been storing beets from our garden, so I recently roasted a bunch and I put some slices on top of that bed of microgreens. Now, if you're not crazy about beets, two other options would be slices of apple or pear. Then I sprinkle on some feta cheese. Another cheese that has a little bit more of a bite to it is gorgonzola, and that is awesome on a salad. Then I like to sprinkle on some roasted sliced almonds. I top it all off with either a balsamic vinaigrette, or my most recent favorite is a mustard dressing that I just love. It's a combination of olive oil, a splash of balsamic vinegar, a squirt of stone ground mustard, about half a teaspoon of sugar, and a little bit of salt. You mix it all together so that it's a nice emulsion, drizzle it over the top of the salad, and yum, it is absolutely delicious. Well, I've replanted my second crop of brassicas and covered the planting, and I have re-moistened the soil for the peas because they're going to keep sprouting for me. So they go back under the lights and we start the process all over again. I hope you found this video helpful. I'm sorry it was so long, but I had so much I wanted to cover with you. If you have any questions at all, don't hesitate to email me at susan@susansinthegarden.com. Take care.